Hidden Gems, Episode 4, Publisher Spotlight on Ystari Games. Welcome to Hidden Gems, a board game podcast where we review unusual, forgotten, and underappreciated board games. We're your hosts. My name is Chris.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Cameron. Thanks for listening to our show.
Back again.
We're back.
Yep, feels good to be back.
Episode 4.
Episode 4. Yeah, I was just telling Cameron before you got here, Jason, that, the first couple episodes, and still a little bit in this episode, there's like a little bit of fear, about...
Oh, for sure.
It's a good kind of fear.
Sounding foolish. A good kind of fear. But I was actually really anticipating it today. You know what I mean? I was just excited to get back in the chair and start recording, because I just enjoy talking about games with you guys.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun so far.
Yeah, for sure.
Feels a little bit less like work now.
A little bit.
Until we start editing.
Sure. Until you start editing.
So what are we drinking today, Chris?
So, as I mentioned earlier, our topic for today is Ystari Games. And I had to get really creative with this one, because what kind of cocktail do you make for Ystari Games?
You need a cocktail that has YS in the name.
Yeah. So, the cocktail I did is Jolly's Pisco Sour.
Jolly's
Pisco Sour.
So for anybody who doesn't know, all of the Ystari games, or most of them, I guess, not all of them, but most of them feature the letters YS somewhere in the title.
Yep.
So,
which is what I went with. And
okay.
I feel like I had a stroke of brilliance with this one, because I actually knew this cocktail. With German Vacation with Rainer Knizia, I actually had to research online trying to come up with something German.
Right.
And with this one, I did know this drink. I had made this drink many times before this show. So Jolly's Pisco Sour is named after a bartender named Charles Jolly. He's kind of considered to have mastered this recipe. It's a really classic cocktail. So Pisco Sour, if you don't know, has pisco in it, which is a brandy. It's a Peruvian brandy, actually. And if you drink it neat, you definitely get the grape flavor coming through on it. It's pretty strong. Yeah, it's one of the stronger brandies, at least from a grape standpoint. So it's got that in it. It's got lime juice, simple syrup, and then an egg white, which really I think is what takes it over the top, because you get a really nice foam on the top. You do a dry shake followed by a shake with ice, put a little swirl of bitter on the top, and that's a Pisco Sour.
It's quite good.
I will say I'm not usually a fan of drinks that have egg white in them, but this one's pretty good.
Well done.
Well, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
So we've got the Guild going. We've seen some activity on there. How's that been going?
Yeah, the Guild is going good. I'll confess. So Jason and I use BGG a lot, and setting up a Guild was exciting, but also I felt a little bit ashamed at the same time, because once we started setting up the Guild and setting up our profiles, there was a lot of things that we just didn't understand, like the concept of Geek Gold.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. I'd always known what Geek Gold... I thought I knew what it was, but I didn't exactly understand how it worked, because I just used BGG as a reference, or I used to, just to look up information about games. And when we started the Guild, Jason sent me a text message, and he's like, "Hey, do you have Geek Gold?"
Oh, yeah. Definitely need Geek Gold to set up a Guild.
Yeah, he's like, "We need Geek Gold to start the Guild." I was like, "Shoot, I don't have Geek Gold. I don't know what we're going to do about that." So I actually reached out to one of my friends, Ravindra Prasad, also known as Snooze Fest, who is a member of the Guild. And I asked him, I was like, "Hey, man, can you spot us like 10 Geek Gold?" I feel like I was asking him this huge favor.
to make the Guild.
He's probably got hundreds of dollars in Geek Gold, okay? Because he's been a gamer for forever. I'll talk about him a little bit more when we talk about the Guild in detail. But he sent it to us, wish us good luck. And then a day later, we found out you could just buy it yourself.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, thanks a lot, Ravindra. Appreciate that.
No, we really do appreciate it.
Helping us get this thing off the ground. So it seems like we've had a little bit of activity from some listeners who've been enjoying the podcast and who had some other questions for us. Did you want to highlight some of them?
Yeah, for sure. So as it stands today, we have 13 active members in the Guild, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
If you scroll through the list of guilds for podcasts, a lot of them have like 4 or 5 members. Some of them because they're probably just defunct and they're not active anymore. But that's actually pretty decent, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Some of the more popular ones have up into the hundreds.
We'll take whatever we can get.
Whatever we can get right now. But we have members, and some of them have been pretty active. So we just wanted to call out a few by name. At least I did, just to kind of say thanks for being a part. So I'll read out the names here. So we've got Ben Saito. Do you know who that is?
No.
It's Ben Anderson.
Oh, okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah, one of our buddies, Ben. Blue Dane, DWAG44, Jay Wowzer, Jay Takagi, Nolisk. And then these three I wanted to call out particularly because they've been pretty active in the guild so far. Sure. So Boond, this is the guy that has the Board Gems YouTube channel.
Daryl Boone.
Oh, cool.
Daryl Boone.
Yeah.
So if you go on YouTube, he's a guy that has similar interests to us. He really enjoys
minded.
Hidden gems, but he does a YouTube show, not a podcast.
Cool.
So I sent him a message, told him thanks for being a part, for participating. I told him I'd give him a little shout out. So
yeah.
Thanks, Daryl.
He's got some pretty good content out there so far.
He does. He covers a lot of really good quality stuff.
That's awesome.
I definitely recommend checking it out. X-Gamer MS99, who's been really active, and then Ghidorah, who's probably been the most active of anybody. He has been asking a lot of really awesome questions, has been participating a lot. And what I mean by participating, I'll go ahead and give you kind of a taste of how our guild is structured and what we're trying to do. So every game that we review is featured in the guild. It has its own post where if you want to comment on something, say like for Via Appia, if you think that me and Cameron are just full of crap and you think the quarry sucks,
It does.
There's a post there for that. Or if you think Jason is just being really butthurt about the quarry, you can, post about that
Jason
as well.
secretly has another BGG identity where he just comes in and just trashes.
Yeah, that's right.
I was just about to say that. I'm going to create another account tonight.
To figure out which one it is.
Go on the guild and talk about how great Via Appia is. It is there for you. So we have that. Another thing, and this is where we've gotten the most traffic by far, is we have posts where we're taking recommendations. So, for example, we did last episode on Reiner Knizia, and I liked that episode, where we feature a publisher or designer. So we've put some more publishers out there like Stefan Dora, Wolfgang Kramer, Martin Wallace, and just asking people, be like, hey, what games from this designer do you think are hidden gems that we should cover on the podcast?
Yeah.
And that's gotten a lot of play. I think people really like that. Upcoming reprints that you may have heard about that you think would be worth us covering of hidden gem games, things like that.
Yeah, that's awesome because I think one of the things that we would love to see happen is for it not to just be the three of us plus our friend on YouTube who care about this idea of highlighting games that are somewhat underappreciated, and we would love for people to join us in the search and even feel like they can have an impact on what we even cover, what we dedicate our time and our gameplays to when we're preparing for the podcast, by saying, hey, this is an awesome game. I think it's a hidden gem.
Yep.
And maybe we might think it's a hidden gem too. That's super cool.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. In episode 0, my goal was to create a community. And it's happening already.
Cool.
It's a small one.
Exactly.
But I could see it getting bigger, which is exciting. So that's awesome. And then I almost forgot one other member. I do want to mention him. Ravindra Prasad, or Snoozefest, has been a friend of the podcast. He's helped us out a lot, given us a lot of good advice. And he's just a cool guy. He actually lives 30 minutes from us in Hillsboro. And he's a bit of a board gaming celebrity. He would think that it's ridiculous that I'm even saying that if he's listening to this. But he and his wife, Mary Prasad, if you've been in the hobby for a while, probably know who they are, or you've at least probably heard of his wife, Mary. So Mary is Dicey Chic. She used to be a contributor for the Dice Tower.
Oh, cool.
And she's the Tichu lady. She is super huge into Tichu, and that's kind of what she's known for. And I get the pleasure of getting a game with them every so often.
Cool.
Go over to their house, which
that's
they
awesome.
have 2,500 games.
Oh, wow.
It's
That's amazing.
Crazy awesome. I mean, it's just everywhere. They have an awesome game room. Their house is just cool in general.
I love the idea of playing teacher with someone who's super serious about it, but also I really don't want to get my butt kicked.
She is a shark. I mean, she really is. She is phenomenally good. Her and Ravindra both, honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
What a great game.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Our podcast isn't about that game, but man, such a good game to talk about. We had some good mailbag questions from, I think it was Ghidorah, right, on the guild?
It was.
Okay, so I think we wanted to just take a minute and just answer those questions on the podcast. We mentioned in the guild, I think that we were going to, at some point, address these questions.
I think it'd be fun, yeah.
So let's just take them one by one. The first one, Ghidorah writes, you guys talked a little bit about your backgrounds and the gaming that got you into the hobby, but how would you define the games that you like? For example, Omni Gamer, economic simulation, heavy games. I guess probably game mechanics is in the spirit of what he's asking.
Yep.
Yeah, for me, I think, I like any game, honestly. But if I had to choose, specific mechanisms, I think auctions for sure. We've already done an episode about auctions.
Yep.
Area control is another one I really enjoy. El Grande is a favorite game of mine. And trick-taking. I think I really enjoy trick-taking games. I'd say traditionally I've generally been a pretty heavy focused gamer.
I was starting to say, if you don't say this, I'm going to.
Yeah.
Don't pretend like you're not.
No, I definitely have gravitated towards the heavy games, sometimes to a fault. But I think I'm realizing, as I get older and have more kids and less time, that I really do enjoy the simple rule set. Get it out, play, 45 minutes to an hour. Still have a place in my heart for those heavier games every so often, but
Sure. Yep.
Definitely learning more about the lighter end of the spectrum now.
Yep. Yeah, I would say for me, similar to Jason, I would definitely consider myself to be an omni gamer. That's kind of the term that's used. Gamers that'll play almost anything. And I feel like that's true of myself. I think there are certainly different styles of games that I prefer. So for me personally, I really enjoy worker placement quite a bit. Economic games and auction games, like Jason, I really like those as well because they just tend to lead to really difficult decisions, which is what I'm looking for. Agonizingly difficult decisions. That's what I like. What I don't like, I don't really care for party games very much. There are a few that I like Just One, which is not a hidden gem at all.
Right.
But I like that game. But most games I don't. I hate Codenames. Blasphemy. I think Codenames sucks, honestly. Yeah. I hate that game. It's boring, I think. I just don't care for most party games, generally speaking. Brace yourself, Cameron. With a caveat. I don't love co-op games. Okay. Now I like Gloomhaven, which we play together.
Yeah.
I don't like co-op games that have quarterbacking.
Yeah.
I
can be a problem for sure.
I hate them.
I get it.
I hate Pandemic. I just don't like it because invariably, unless you're just with a special group of people, and even in that case, you're going to run into situations where half the people want to do one thing and half the people want to do something else, and some people are going to end up being disappointed. It's just going to happen, right? And so for that reason, I just don't like those kind of games.
Okay. My take on this, some of my favorite categories are definitely games like deck builders. My wife and I play Dominion all the time.
Casey is a Dominion shark, man.
She's actually rated really highly worldwide on Dominion games on the online version. I don't have the patience to play actual people online because it just take forever on their turn. So I love deck builders, even beyond Dominion. I really do like co-op games, and I think the caveat to because I agree with you, quarterbacking is terrible. There's nothing worse than trying to play a game and someone else is basically playing your turn. Like, okay, I guess I'll just do what you suggested. I think that's the difference between a bad co-op game and a good co-op game. Worker placement games, I enjoy that. I like a lot of card games. A lot of the games that we play that are card games are ones that I would say are some of my favorites. Auctions, once again, I mean, we love auctions games here. We play them a lot. I actually really like programming games.
Yeah,
we've seen a bunch of them come across the table.
Mechs versus Minions, you like?
Oh, dude, Mechs versus
Minions. That's a co-op game I like.
Sure,
because there's no quarterbacking in it.
Yeah,
right?
you were so concentrated on just getting your turn done. So yeah, those types of programming style games, I kind of love that, especially because it's programming that's not like my work.
Right.
Even games like Robo Rally, it's like brutal, so brutal, but man, just chaos and fun.
Such a chaotic,
I like
amazing
Robo Rally.
So yeah, I think that kind of hits those for me. So let's maybe take on the next question. What was the hidden gem that made you realize that hidden gems are out there if you just do a little bit of research? I don't know if it's possible to pinpoint one specific game.
Yes.
So several answers are okay. And follow up, do you still like that game? Why or why not?
So I know what I would say here. For me, it's Three Kingdoms Redux.
Okay.
Have either of you played this with me?
Yeah, I've played it a couple times.
Oh, you both have?
I've played it once.
Okay. I couldn't remember because it's been a while since I played it. But I heard about Three Kingdoms Redux through Heavy Cardboard, and just by the nature of some heavy games, they tend to be more obscure, so I really got into that podcast. And when I started playing some of their recommendations and seeing there was just more out there, Three Kingdoms Redux was a game that really hooked me because nobody talked about it but them.
The game is hard.
Oh, gosh, yeah, it's hard.
It's real hard.
It's just fascinating. It's worker placement, but with competition, which is not totally unique. Carson City is that way, but it has dice rolling. There's randomness,
that game's
right?
hard, too.
It's hard, too. Yeah, but Three Kingdoms Redux is totally deterministic, right? And I'm not going to talk a lot about because we don't have the time, but it's awesome. And it doesn't get enough love. And for me, that's what kind of started me down the path to really never come back.
We're not covering that game, right?
Heavy Cardboard covers it so much.
Okay.
But maybe one day. It doesn't get enough love, for sure.
That game is about punching people in the face, and it's like getting punched in the face.
It is.
Sometimes.
It's brutal. I love it.
I don't actually have a great answer to this question. I mean, I'll give my answer, but
my
answer is that I don't have a great answer to this question because so many of the games that I get introduced to are by being friends with Chris and coming over and just being like, I don't care what we play tonight, I'm just here to play games.
Yeah.
And Chris, I think over the time that we've been friends and been playing games, I've seen a shift in your desire to be like,
oh yeah,
man, I love these games that everybody's playing, but I don't want to just do that.
Yep.
And you have a lot of games, and I think we make fun of you enough about how many games you have on your shelves and like, have we played that? Like maybe we should play that.
Yep.
That I think it just gives us a space to explore like this.
Absolutely.
And I'm all about like, when Chris goes, I think we need to play a new game tonight. I'm like, dude, let's do it. Like, I'm happy to learn a new game. I think some people appreciate novelty more than others. You know,
sure.
I think it's totally fine if you only have a certain amount of time to play games. But I think for those of you that are listening to this podcast, honestly, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably curious, like, what else is out there?
Yep.
And this is an outlet for research for finding those hidden gems.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know if it was episode 0 or episode 1 when I mentioned this, but that novelty aspect in searching for games has always been there. I think, you know, because I've been friends with you for so long, Chris, and you have such a huge collection, I think whenever I'm looking for a game that I might potentially buy, I'm usually looking for something that I'm pretty sure you don't have already, which doesn't necessarily make it a hidden gem. It doesn't necessarily make it a hidden gem, but I think one that I can point back to, I don't know if this would qualify as a hidden gem or not, but there's a game called Kalamala that I actually got it from France because that was the only place I could find it at the time. It hadn't been released in the US yet, and kind of went through a lot of trouble to go and find this game. And I personally really enjoy it. It's a little dry perhaps from a theme perspective, but I really enjoyed it, and that was fully born out of that desire to just go find something new that nobody had heard of before. I would say for the purposes of this podcast, like really when I started like digging in and mining the database, shout out to previous episode, Nefertiti was really one of the first ones that really jumped out at me of, oh man, this is really highly rated and nobody's heard of this. And so I jumped on it, and you guys know our opinion on it now from the previous episodes. But I've always really enjoyed that part of the search.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So there's one more we were going to take, and that is, what's a hidden gem that you haven't played but suspect you'll really like? What's drawing you to that title?
Yeah, so I'm going to mention 2 really quickly that I really have my eye on that'll probably be spotlighted soon because they appeal to me. One is Cavum, which is by Kramer and Kiesling, which I love. A lot of their games we really enjoy.
Heavier game there.
A little bit, yeah. So it's basically a game about blasting tunnels and mining for gems, as it turns out. How appropriate, right? So Cavum, I would say. And then another one, so I'm really drawn to unique and bizarre themes, and there's a game called Code of Nine. It used to be called Awakon, which stands for Old World and Code of Nine. And it's a really weird game by Bakafire, I think, which is a Japanese company. It's a worker placement game with hidden information goals, but basically you're like an automaton or an android in a post-apocalyptic world, and humanity has been wiped out. And then you wake up and you try to figure out what happened to them in the game.
Whoa.
It's really weird. Every time I've heard somebody talk about it, the word that's always used is weird. Which might mean it's not good, but it's on my shelf right over here, and I really want to play it. So I would say those 2.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say my list is huge now that I've gone through 100,000 games on Board Game Geek. But I'll just throw one out there that I found that I thought was interesting. It's a trick-taking game, actually, and it's called Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's an old game, 1997, I think. But it's trick-taking where you can force your opponent to play your card for you, which I think is just a fascinating mechanism. Could be terrible, for all I know, but it's a very difficult game to find. So if we ever find it, maybe we'll feature it. But
for sure, we will be doing card game episodes for sure.
Cool. I don't really have an answer to this one. I am the least adventurous gem miner. I am here for support because you guys bring a lot of great ideas and things that we should play, and you need a third player.
That's right. We need the support.
That's what I'm here for.
Heck yeah, dude.
Perfect. Well, we're going to talk about Ystari Games.
Yeah, let's get
this
into
episode.
it.
Chris, do you have any background information about Ystari?
So last episode when we talked about Reiner Knizia, we got to do a little bio on him, and I really enjoyed that. I thought that was fun. I'm going to try to do that as much as I can in these kind of episodes where we highlight a publisher or a designer.
I learned about airline spoons.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. Fascinating stuff about him. And I dug really hard on Ystari because I wanted to find things like that, and I didn't really. There's a few things. This won't be very long, but we will talk about Ystari Games in a little more detail. So they're a French company, started in 2004, okay? Like Jason alluded to earlier, kind of what makes them well-known, I guess, if they are well-known by people, is their naming convention. So that YS combination. Their most famous game is probably Caelus, which has a Y and an S in it. They have many others, Ispahan, Asteroids, Metropolys, East, but they have some others like Shakespeare. Their most recent release does not follow that convention, but usually they do. So Ystari Games was acquired by Asmodee in 2015, which if you know anything about the board game industry and the board game hobby, Asmodee acquires a lot of smaller board game companies. And ever since that happened, they've pretty much just gone dark. Ystari doesn't produce any more games, at least not under the Ystari label. And I haven't even really seen Asmodee releasing Ystari games under their label either, so I don't really know what's going on there. They acquired them. Well, actually, I might have a theory, but they acquired them and then they stopped releasing games. Okay, so the founder of Ystari Games, Cyril Demaid, I think I'm saying his name correctly. He began to work for Asmodee during the acquisition, and he's actually responsible for creating a line of games, the Unlock games. So if you look at the Unlock escape room games, he's designed like over half of them.
Oh, wow.
So I'm wondering if when Asmodee acquired Ystari Games, Asmodee was like, hey, we want you to do this. Or he just got into that. Because literally, he's probably done 10 to 15 Unlock games.
Okay.
Which probably explains why they're just kind of kaput now.
Because he's like kind of the main person.
Yeah, he's
and
doing
they've got
the
him on a
Unlock stuff.
different line of things. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
So
interesting.
I think that's what's happened. So yeah, that's Ystari Games.
Awesome.
Cool. So, speaking of Ystari Games, why don't we get into talking about a few of them?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Once upon a time, the awe-inspiring Metropolis is burgeoning. Talented urban planners and architects compete with each other to make luxurious, elegant buildings of glass and steel that seem to defy the laws of gravity and balance. Who will eventually impose their style to leave an indelible mark on the history of the city? The answer is in your hands.
Beautiful.
Fantastic.
Metropolis, published in 2008 by Ystari Games, obviously. BGG ranking at the time of this recording is 857, so not very low. It's within the top 1,000, and you know how we feel about that. I don't love doing it, but I think I can make an exception for this one because this one is not very often talked about. Okay. Designer is Sebastian Pochon. I had not heard of this guy. I looked him up, but he has designed other games that we've definitely heard of. So he's the designer of Jaipur, interestingly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And Jamaica.
Oh.
Which is about as opposite of this game as you can get, right? Like, it's very different. But yeah, Jamaica, that surprised me. Okay. I heard about this game, like most games, from the Dice Tower. Z Garcia talks about this game sometimes. So that's how I've heard about it from him. So a brief rule summary. So with Metropolis, you know how we love auction games here on Hidden Gems. This is another auction game, and it's a very unique one. So in this particular auction game, you're going to have a finite pile of buildings numbered 1 through 13, and this is your bidding power in the game. The way that it works is you're going to place these buildings out onto a Metropolis in an attempt to gain control of areas to satisfy secret objectives and score in-game points. Okay? Within the Metropolis, you have 5 districts, okay? And each district is divided into different colored territories, okay? So at the start of the game, the first player is going to take one of their buildings. They can choose whichever one that they want, and they're going to place a single building into one single territory within any district of their choosing. Then it'll go to the next player, and then they can either pass. If they pass, they're then out of that round of bidding, or they can raise the bid. The way that they will do this is by placing a building of a higher number into a territory adjacent to the previously placed building. Okay? So let's say they do that, then it goes to the next person. Then again, they have to raise the bid, placing a higher ranked building into an adjacent territory of the most recently placed building. Okay? So the buildings are going to kind of snake throughout the metropolis as you do this until everybody passes but one person. Once everybody passes, the winner will take their building, the highest building, and flip it upside down, and they have now claimed that territory, okay, within that district. Everybody else will take their buildings and pull them back. So you don't lose them. Only the person that wins loses that building. So then their pile of bidding power has just gotten a little smaller, okay?
But they claim the territory.
But they've claimed the territory, and they may be doing that to score victory points. Because the way you can score victory points in this game, there's several ways. So the color of the territory might give you points as a secret objective. There are certain secret objectives, whereas like you're trying to get your, like 3 buildings in a row, for example. So you might claim that territory to try to accomplish that. And then in addition to your secret objectives, there are also tokens on the territories that will award you points in different ways. One final thing that I would like to mention is that the buildings are also of different heights. You've got tall buildings, which are your high numbers, then medium buildings and small buildings. At the end of the game, you'll get 5 bonus points if you have the tallest buildings in each district. So it gives you another thing to think about, another decision. The game will end once a single player has gotten all 13 of their buildings onto the board. At that point, the game ends immediately. You'll total your points, and most points wins the game. So that's generally how you play Metropolys. So, in episode 2, in our auction episode, I talked about how much I love Strasbourg, and I do love Strasbourg. I think it's fantastic. But I did make a statement that after playing Metropolys is not totally correct anymore. I had said that I had never seen anything like this finite bidding system in Strasbourg where you have that finite set of 24 cards, and that deck of cards dwindles down, and once you're out of cards, you can't bid anymore. And I said how unique that I thought that was. Well, as it turns out, that's not totally unique because Metropolys is very similar in that regard.
Yeah.
So I have to ask you, since we're seeing at least more than one game now, how do you guys feel about this finite pool of bidding power in an auction game?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most fascinating parts of this game because there's so much going on in these auctions, but you're not only thinking about, well, if I spend one of my highest buildings, then I'm going to start losing auctions because I won't have that bidding power anymore. But there's also a level of strategy there where playing your highest medium-sized building, for example, like playing a 9, forces that next person to have to make that choice of, is this worth playing a large building for?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, anytime that you're using this sort of bidding pool mechanism, I think it makes for interesting decision making. I think one thing that's particularly unique about Metropolys, though, up against something like Strasbourg, is in Strasbourg, you don't know when you're going to see those different elements of your bidding power come up. You have your whole bidding power available to you, and so you would think maybe this would be easier than in a situation like Strasbourg, but it's actually more difficult because you're sitting there going, is this the move when I'm ready to relinquish that particular building? Can I afford to get rid of that one for this bid? Or do I need to hold on to it until maybe it's something like more desirable?
Right. Yeah, that was one of the biggest things that stuck out to me too. In Strasbourg, you can create another large bid if you need to. It will cost you, and it might hurt you later because you might be short stacking yourself, but if you have to, you can. You can just keep drawing cards, right? And make a really big pile.
Yep.
In this game, once you spend your 13, you're at the complete mercy of everyone else that has a 13.
And people will take advantage of that.
And they will hurt you. Cameron did it to me last game, and I was sitting there staring at his 13 the whole game. I was like, will you please freaking play that 13? Because I didn't have mine anymore. Because at any time, that person can just come over top of you. You've lost that power. And I think that creates a really good tension that I really like. It's interesting how the power shifts back and forth because you can be in a disadvantageous position. Then once people play their high ones, now all of a sudden you might have the high building again.
Yep.
Right? Then you have all the power again.
I think I made the mistake in that game of playing all 4 of my large buildings early.
Your first 4 placements.
Which seemed like a great idea at the time because I was able to grab some really advantageous positions. But then for basically the rest of the game, I had very little ability to actually win auctions unless it was for something that nobody cared about.
Right.
Yeah.
So I had a thing I wanted to throw out about Metropolis that I wanted to know what you guys think. So for me, one of the most agonizing decisions in this game is when you win a building and suddenly it's your turn to start the new round.
Yep.
I really don't feel like I ever got comfortable deciding how I was going to decide where to put my first building.
Yeah.
How did you guys get around that?
I'm not sure there is a way to be comfortable with that.
I have some thoughts.
It's a tricky decision, right?
Yeah.
Because I think one of the most unique aspects of this auction is that not only are you having to decide what the value is of something that you're bidding for, but what you're bidding for is changing constantly. Mm-hmm. Every time somebody ups the bid, not only are they upping the bid, but they're changing what we're bidding on.
Yes.
And you're never bidding on the same thing.
Yep.
And you're navigating the bid towards something, right? So
or away from something.
Or away from something.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, like it's kind of snaking through the city, right? So it's like, well, do I start the bidding on the thing that I really want, or do I start it a couple spaces away, hoping that maybe it goes that direction, but then maybe
it's my turn to bid, right?
Right, but then maybe it's going to completely go the opposite direction.
Yep.
And yeah, so that's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think my answer would be similar. I think you have to control the direction of the snake of the auction in a way that you want it to go or don't. If you look at your pile buildings and you don't have a lot of auction power, when I'm bidding, I'm trying to make it go in a way away from things that I know that I eventually want to try to win.
Now I want to play again to see, see
right.
if I could try that.
It's not about the initial bidding necessarily, but one of the other fascinating things about this moving auction is trying to get to something that you want, but it's your turn and it's not quite there yet. So if I see the snake is moving towards something that I want, but there's a gap, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not there yet, so I can't bid on the thing that I really want. It's that agonizing question of, well, do I bid
and maybe
something?
Win it?
Do I bid something to just keep it moving?
Yeah.
To stay in the bid?
Yes.
But I might end up actually winning that thing that I don't want.
There have been many times I've bid on a spot for that very reason, thinking in my head, please, Lord, just bid on this next district so I don't win this thing I don't want, right? And then lose a pawn that might be useful to me later.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that really makes this game is these secret objectives that you have. Everybody has two. One is color-based, where every color district that you have of a particular color scores you points.
2 points.
The other one is more unique. Well, what were y'all's thoughts on those hidden objectives and how they factor into the gameplay?
So I liked the idea that not only do you have hidden objectives, but they don't fall into the same category. So you have 2 hidden objective cards, and one of them is you get points for landing your buildings in certain colored territories, and then the other one is like a landscape-based hidden objective.
Right.
You get points for being on either side of a bridge, or being 3 around a fountain, or a few around a lake, or something like that. The effort to sort of synergize and marry those 2 objectives into the same spots makes for an interesting sort of path for your strategy to develop as you play the game.
Yeah.
I appreciated that they structured it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's no secret that I love secret objectives. And again, I'm sorry, Strasbourg, right? I love it, okay? Just everything relates back to
You've heard it
Strasbourg.
enough, Chris. Come on.
But it's a valid point, okay? So Strasbourg has secret objectives too, and I like that it gives you some direction. And, you know, this game wouldn't be as good without the secret objectives. I do believe that. However, there are definitely potentially some flaws in the secret objectives. There are a couple of secret objectives, one in particular, that is just really hard to pull off. There's one where you have to get around 3 fountains to get 7 points. It's the most valuable one.
Yep.
But the reason it's the most valuable one is it's because it's the hardest one.
Yep.
And the reason it's the hardest one is because within 3 turns, everybody knows what you're trying to do.
Yep.
Unless you're just being real
and you have
sneaky.
very little flexibility. Like most of the objectives, if somebody takes a particular district that you really needed, you can pivot and you can go and do something else. In this one, it's much more rigid. It just forces you to play much more strictly. you're limited in what you can grab that will actually score you those points.
Yeah, and your opponents can just deny you, just because they know you're doing it. I mean, I think last time I played, actually, I just kind of jokingly said in turn 3, well, Jason's got fountains. And he did, of course.
And I didn't get any of them.
And he didn't get any.
Because you blocked me on all of them.
Exactly. You're right.
And
that's kind of a disadvantage, right?
Yeah. I mean, we talked about fountains. I actually did play the game with fountains, and I managed to get 14 points by getting that twice. But I didn't win that game despite getting the fountains twice and getting 14 points off of it. Because I focused on it so hard that I ended up not getting points from tokens. I ended up not getting points from winning districts because I was consumed with trying to undo the damage that I was receiving from my opponents being like, Cameron's got fountains, let's smash him,
Right.
So you end up having to focus on it more than you would if you were playing other ones and sort of being able to get the tokens or getting the other, point strategies.
For sure. Yeah, so I think we've kind of organically just kind of talked about pros and have transitioned to cons, right? So I think, there's the con of the secret objectives, some of them. One other con I'll mention, and this is a minor con for reasons that I'll explain later, but this board is just ugly and garish. My word, it's terrible.
I don't think it's the worst of the Ystari games, but
I think
could
it's
use some
my
work.
least favorite. It's like this weird futuristic Art Deco weird look. I mean, it is ugly. It's one of the ugliest boards I've ever seen. It's terrible. And not to mention, the bridges between districts are connections, right?
Right.
And they're just hard to recognize.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many times people will put a building down and I'm like, you can't go there. And I'm like, oh, yeah, there's a bridge, right? Like, I don't know. I just found that to be annoying. The graphic design is not great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so should we move on to final thoughts?
I think so. I think we're ready.
Sure.
Yeah, so before we do, we didn't do this in the last couple episodes, but I think it's probably a good idea since we are so new to just kind of quickly restate our grading scheme. I really want to do that the last couple times. I just forgot, to be honest. But, you might hear us say, I rate this game a 6, and it's phenomenal. And you're like, well, on a 10-point scale, that's not very phenomenal. So just so that we're clear. So we rate on a 6-point scale, okay? 1 being the lowest, 6 being the highest. So if we rate something a 1, we don't like the game because we think it's broken in some way. There's a flaw with the game. Something is wrong with the game. A 2 is just a bad game. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it as a game design. We just don't like the game at all. 3 game for us is just what we call a meh game. It's just okay. Not bad really, but it doesn't excite us. 4 is a good game. We like it. We would play it again. We think it's good.
We wouldn't sell it.
We wouldn't sell it. I wouldn't sell it. Exactly. 5 is an excellent game, above average. We really enjoy this game a lot. We think it's a very worthwhile play. And then 6 is top of the top, our best games, our favorite games.
Flawless gem.
Flawless gem game. All right. So, with our grading scale being addressed, Jason, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this game, despite my hesitations around the balance. I will say, of all the episodes that we've done, this episode has been by far the hardest.
Yeah.
For all 3 of the games that we're about to talk about. And because I'll play it one time and I'm like, this game is amazing, it's a 5. And then I'll play it again and I'll be like, this game is terrible, it's a 2. And I just go back and forth. So I think for me, I settled on a 4 for this game. I enjoy it. The auction mechanism is fascinating to me. It's one of the coolest auction mechanisms I've ever seen. I really enjoy that. I really wanted to rate this a 5, but I think some of those balance issues scared me off of the 5. So probably in between those two for me, somewhere.
All right. Well, I think this game is fantastic.
All right.
I think Metropolys is fantastic. It's not a terribly long game, but it presents a ton of really interesting and tough decisions. It sends you toward particular objectives without making it obvious what you should do. There are as many opportunities for tactical decision-making as there are for strategic decision-making in this game. I think the migrating auction concept is super interesting and unique. And the limited fixed nature of your bidding power, like we were talking about, is a really fun way to play an auction game. I rate Metropolys a 5.
Nice.
I'm really looking forward to the reprint. I think we talked about a reprint.
We'll be talking about it in a minute.
I'm really looking forward to that, especially if they are able to address some of the visual concerns and potentially some of these balancing concerns.
All right. So as I've alluded to, there are a lot of similarities between this game and Strasbourg. And in case you didn't know, I love Strasbourg.
But are you sure?
I love it quite a bit. And it's very similar. Okay. So I don't think it's as good as Strasbourg. Strasbourg is a 6 for me. But I do think this game is fantastic as well. I'm in Cameron's boat. This game is a 5 for me. The auction mechanism is just so incredibly fascinating and very well done. I always enjoy it every time. The only reason this game is not a 6 for me is that secret objective card, or those two, the lakes and the fountains. Every time I draw that one, I just groan. And that just shouldn't be in a game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It cheapens it just a little bit. If it weren't for that, this would be a 6 for me as well. It's just so good. So yeah, strong 5 for me.
Cool.
Sweet. Well, where can we find Metropolys for folks who are interested?
Yeah, so if you want to get Metropolys, this game is definitely out of print, but you can get it on the BGG marketplace. There are 15 copies on BGG, so pretty easy to get there. But as Cameron alluded to, this game is getting reprinted. It's supposed to be getting reprinted this year by Ystari Games. And if that sounds familiar to you, that's because Ystari reprinted Brass, which everybody loves, and is an amazing production. Sweet. So all of these ugly, garish issues with the board will not be an issue with this reprint. Okay, the name of the reprint will be Skyrise.
Cool.
But it is a reprint of Metropolys of sorts.
Is it Skyrise with a Y-S?
It's not, because it's not Ystari.
Right.
It's Ystari. So I want to read something that Gavin Brown said of Ystari. I found this in the BGG forums. Well, actually, let me back up. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the changes. So check this out. The private goals are going to be done away with. Not the color objectives, but the secret objectives like the fountain thing.
Interesting.
They're now going to be public.
What?
So everybody is trying to do it. So the fountain one would be everybody is trying to do it.
It's
a public objective.
I thought you were going to say that they're turning it into like a mean game where you're just like, Chris has the fountain, let's crush him.
Crush him. No. It'll be like out. And everybody's trying to do that thing.
That sounds awesome, because that'll make the competition for those spots that much
more so. Okay. Exactly. And they're also adding modular things to it. So there'll be player powers, different special tokens, something they're calling monuments, which I don't know what that means, but there's going to be extra stuff. So now, what Gavin Brown said, he said, the two games, speaking of Metropolys and Skyrise, are really not alike, other than that they use the same base mechanism. We have designed a new game using Metropolys as a base. It's a completely new thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Intriguing.
Yeah. So I'm not selling Metropolys.
They changed like the token system and stuff too?
I don't know.
It's like they're taking all of our criticisms and basically just doing away with all the bad parts and inventing new stuff.
Sounds like they're fixing things. I mean, he's making it sound like too, though, that there's going to be a lot of differences between them.
Cool.
So it might be so much so that you could keep them both. I mean, I'm definitely going to hang on to Metropolys until we pay it and see which one I prefer.
Sure.
As long as it doesn't overcomplicate it more than it needs to be.
Well, it sounds like it could if you want to add all these modules,
sure.
To the game. But, so that's the latest on Metropolys.
Sweet. Well, that'll wrap up Metropolys for us.
Yeah, that's it.
Once upon a time, in remote times, King Gradlon had the magnificent city of Ys erected for his daughter, Dahut. Gargantuan seawalls protected the city from violent waves. Dahut decided to make Ys the most powerful place in Brittany. Thus, she dispatched dragons to seize merchant ships loaded with jewels which sailed on the open sea.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay.
That's all they gave us.
Ended a little abruptly there.
It did. I was waiting for more, actually.
I was too.
Yeah.
I was transcribing this into my notes going, and then what happened?
That's a little disappointing.
You'll have to write your own ending.
Yeah.
All right. So Ys, published in 2004 by Ystari Games, obviously. Designed by Cyril Demaid and currently ranked on BGG 1295. Ys is an area control game mixed with some, it's not really set collection, but you're trying to collect more gems of different colors than other players. Each player has 11 pawns, and these pawns are numbered. Numbers range between 0 and 4, right? And so basically, we're going around and placing 2 at a time until every player has placed 8 out into the city of Ys. So the city of Ys is divided into 4 quadrants, and each quadrant is divided into 3 different areas. So there's the harbor, and the commercial district, and the palace. And each of these areas has a different function that we'll learn about in a second. But players are going to be placing 2 pawns at a time. And the interesting thing here is that one of those pawns gets placed face up, where the number is visible, and one of those pawns is going to get placed face down, where the number is not visible. So you have a little bit of hidden information going on. So once everyone has placed all 8 of their pawns, we'll go through each of those districts and resolve them for scoring. So what that means is in each district, whoever has the highest total value, so if you flip all of the pawns face up, the highest total value added together, that player is going to have the opportunity to choose 2 gems from a ship card that's available in each district. That ship has a number of colored gems on it: blue, green, yellow, I don't remember all the colors. And then the second highest player will have the opportunity to choose 1 of the remaining gems, and then the third highest player gets the last gem that's there. But then the interesting thing is that each of the 3 areas of that district will function in a different way. So whoever has the highest value in the harbor is going to receive a special black gem. These gems increase in value the more of them you have by the end of the game. Whoever wins the commercial area of the quadrant gets just a straight 3-point bonus. And whoever wins the palace area of the district is going to get a special ability card that is unique to that district and unique per round. So once all 4 areas of the city have been resolved, then there's one other aspect of the game, which is the market. So instead of placing into one of the city areas, you can optionally place one of your pawns during the placement phase into this market grid. And the grid is structured in a way such that there's columns that align with each of the 4 colors of gem. And so based on the placements that happen within this market, whichever columns or particular gem colors end up with the most influence or the highest valued pawns in them, that's going to determine which direction on basically a stock market type track those gems are going to move. And so at the end of the game, whoever has the most of a particular color of gem is going to score a certain number of points based on where that gem's position lies on that market track. So not only are you trying to collect the most gems of a color to get the most points out of that gem, but you're also trying to influence the value of that gem relative to the others throughout the game.
You want the most valuable gems.
Right. So that's basically all there is to it. We do 4 rounds of that, and at the end of the game, those majorities in the colors of gems play out in terms of, the highest valued gem is going to score the most points, and so on from there. And that's really it.
Yep.
One of the things that I thought was fascinating about this game is the placement of the pawns, one being face up and one being face down, right? Because you only ever have some of the information. And if somebody starts competing with you in an area, they might place face up, so you know exactly what they're coming at you with. They might place face down. What were y'all's thoughts on that hidden information aspect?
Yeah, so it definitely makes the game difficult.
Yeah,
because essentially what you're talking about is a blind auction.
It's a blind bid,
more or less.
Absolutely.
Yes, some of the information is up, but because you can divide it, you don't have to place both of your pawns on the same location. You don't know what's going on with the other one. And there's almost a little bit of a counting aspect in terms of what everybody's inventory is the same in terms of the pawns that they have. You're kind of going, okay, Chris played a 4. So is this one his other 4? How much does he really want that? I don't know.
Or I see both of Chris's 4s, so I know that can't be a 4.
Right. I got him beat, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe. We'll start to figure it out. Yeah, the face down aspect you can just really terrorize people with this. If you're into that kind of thing and you really like to torment your opponents, this is the game for you, because this game drove me nuts with that. I'm not going to say whether I thought this was a good thing or a bad thing, but there were several times where you can just make somebody so uncertain about a placement that they can just blow pretty much all their bidding power. Like, I put a 4 in an area, and Cameron put a face-down pawn in there, and I felt like I had to win it, and I put another 4 in there to ensure I win it, and then flipped Cameron's over as a freaking 0. So I just blew all of that bidding power just because I didn't know what it was, right? Like, you can really play mind games with your opponents with this face-down bidding.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that face-down element just adds such a bluffing aspect to the game that, I mean, you either love it or you hate it, right? I think it can be frustrating at times, right? If someone's just kind of placing all their face-down pawns in your area and you're like, I have no idea what that is, and now I don't know if I have to react or not. But I enjoyed that part of it. I think it adds an extra dimension to the game that really makes you not know for sure if you're going to be able to grab something out there.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that kind of ties into the blind bidding aspect is I've never seen a game that involves so many tiebreakers. And the need to resolve so many tiebreakers.
Yeah. The tiebreakers is definitely a big part of the game, and I think it segues well into something that I wanted to talk about, was the bid for turn order, which has to do with your tiebreakers.
Right.
So there's a lot of rules. We don't have time to cover them all, but just to reiterate, in case you're confused, before the placement out into the city, you'll put 2 of your pawns in front of your screen, and that's going to be your bid for turn order, okay? To determine if you want to go first or if you want to go last or fall somewhere in the middle. Typically in this game, it's advantageous to go last.
Right.
But in order to go last, you have to bid high in the bid for turn order, and if you do that, you can't use those pawns to place onto the board. So you're weakening yourself in the placement on the board to try to ensure that you get to go last so that you can place after people to try to make sure you win certain areas. It's a really interesting decision there. Do I not bid a lot and try to keep my firepower, or do I bid a lot, try to get a high tiebreaker, try to go later in the turn order, but then I don't have as much power to put out onto the board? Made for an interesting decision, I think. So there's definitely a lot of ways to score points in this game. As Jason mentioned, you're going to score a lot of points based on the values of your gems at the end of the game. But there's also a lot of in-game scoring in this game based upon if you win certain districts within the city of Ys as well. The black gems are worth points. You'll just score straight-up points for winning certain districts in Ys. Some of the special cards will give you points. How much of a role do you feel that in-game, not in the game with a D, but during the game scoring had on the outcome of the game?
I think that if you're not keeping up with that, if you're only going after gems and you're not keeping up in that race, then you're likely not going to have a chance to win at the end. If you don't divide your attention at least somewhat, you're probably out of it, regardless of how you do with the gems at the end. That's my personal opinion.
Okay.
I think that's similar to my thoughts about this. A lot of times when I look at a game, and especially when I'm trying to review it, one of the things that I'm asking is like, is there any aspect of this game, especially with regard to scoring, that you can afford to neglect? Some games I think are built that way. They're built to where it's just like champion the thing that you want to champion and focus on that and don't worry about other things. I feel like in this game, the routes that you have to take to score points, you can't totally afford to neglect anything. And I think that's similar to what Jason is saying. Like, maybe you don't have to focus on it. Like, I think we played one game where you focused on it really hard.
Yeah.
And I think it does have a side effect of making the other players nervous. Like, if you're just like, boom, 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 points, like throughout
I was
the
like
game,
30 points ahead.
You're right.
During the game.
Right.
And I lost. And by a lot.
Yeah.
So this is my issue. Okay. I like games that have multiple paths to victory, where you feel like you have multiple different ways where you can win the game. Not supplement your win, but actually win the game. There's one path to victory in this game. Gems. Yeah. Okay? I challenge anybody to convince me otherwise, because I've tried it a few different ways now, and inevitably what ends up happening is the person wins whoever has the most gems. Okay? Yeah.
But everything you do in this game gives you gems, unless you're not doing it well. So that
You're
would be
saying I wasn't doing it well?
well, not necessarily. I guess what I'm saying is all of the paths overlap, right? Because the way that you primarily get gems is by the full quadrant of the city scoring.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And all of the individual areas within there that, do different things all contribute to that quadrant scoring, right?
Sure.
So if you're playing well to the various quadrants, then you should be getting gems to some degree.
And I was.
Some.
But not nearly as many as y'all were.
Yeah.
Because I was focused much more on, let's see if this is a viable option, trying to get a lot of points in the city during the game while making gem collecting more of a secondary goal. And I got crushed. Right? So, I don't know. That just always puts a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth because I'm like, well, really now what it boils down to is, okay, everybody has to go after gems. And if everybody knows that and everybody's on the same playing field there, then it's just the small differences of who wins the districts or who gets the most black gems or, will make the difference or who controls the market better. But the point I'm making is collecting gems has to be your number one focus.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
I wish there could be two focuses that were equally valid, but there is not, at least in my opinion.
So it's interesting that that's your focus on what's maybe problematic about Ys, because my thoughts are actually kind of similar, which is that the actions that you take to manipulate the value of the gems
We should talk
is
about
not
this.
incredibly consequential in this game.
Jason would
Maybe.
probably
I haven't
disagree with
seen
you.
anyone that actually carefully engineered the value of those gems by taking the actions necessary to be the person who makes those decisions, who actually won the game because of that.
I felt like Jason won the game last time because of that.
Yeah, I made a concerted effort in the last game that we played to try to manipulate it because I feel like what we did in most of the earlier games was one or two gems came out to an early lead and then everybody just focused on trying to get those.
Right.
And if you're competing with everybody else on what they're going for, competition is going to make it harder to win, right?
Right.
So I tried deliberately to go after, well, what are the colors that people aren't going after? I can get those more easily and then manipulate the market to make those the high ones, right? And I won the game
So you
because
feel like
of
that worked.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. Again, I think if everybody knows that gems are the most important thing, right, then manipulating the market and in-game scoring is consequential. But again, just knowing that gems are number one.
Sure.
Because even if you come in first place in the worst gem, it's a ton of points, right? Probably more than you'll ever score in the middle game scoring or close to it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which again just reinforces how important gems are.
Yeah. I guess I don't take as much of an issue with it because it's like, okay, well, cool. If everyone knows that, then everyone,
Yeah.
then it's a matter of who does all the other stuff best.
All right. So I think that's all our thoughts on Ys, yeah?
Yep.
Ready to give it a final rating and grade?
Sure.
Sure. I kind of want to hear yours first, Chris.
Oh, you want me to go first?
I do.
Okay. All right. So, as a general rule for myself, I don't love blind bidding in games. Okay. I just hate the uncertainty of it. Now, that doesn't mean that if a game has blind bidding in it, it's bad. That's just a personal thing for me. But I did find that this game just drove me absolutely crazy with the blind bidding. On top of the fact that I did feel like there was one dominant strategy that you had to figure out was dominant, and then you just had to figure out how to do it better than everybody else. Mm-hmm. That's my biggest issues with the game. However, I did enjoy the game at times, and I can see its merits as a good game. I would say, from a blind bidding standpoint, this is probably my favorite blind bidding game, and it's probably the one that's been done the best. I actually give this game a 4, believe it or not. Okay. I was being hard on a review because I felt like I needed to, because I think there are problems with it, and I suspected y'all might enjoy it more than I did. But having said all the negatives, I actually do think it's a good game. And I will say, if you like blind bidding at all, you should play this game. Mm-hmm. I think you would like it, because it's got some devious blind bidding in it that I think is really interesting. So, for those reasons, I'm giving it a 4. I'm going to keep it. I think it's good enough to keep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, like I said earlier with Metropolys, this set of games was the hardest for me to evaluate, and I'm maybe going to start to sound like a broken record when it comes to these reviews, but I gave this one a 4. It was on the fence for a 5 as well.
Yeah.
And that might be surprising based on, I feel like the general consensus was that I was going to like this one a lot more. This was another one where the first time I played it, I was like, this game is terrible. And then I played it again, and I won, which always helps. I was like, this game is great. And then, I play again, and somewhere in between. So I think it's a good game. Like you said, Chris, for blind bidding, I think it's one of the best. I really enjoy that tension, and I don't see the one-trick pony aspect of the gem collection as much of an issue as you do, perhaps. Because I think it should be made clear when you're playing this game that is the strategy, right? But there are plenty of games that are like that. Area Control, El Grande, any of those games where it's like you do one thing and you do it better than everybody else. And I think that can be good, but in a game like this where there are so many options, I guess it could mislead people into thinking that I'm going to go down this path and I still have a shot.
That's my biggest issue with it. I don't want to interrupt your final thoughts too much, but I will just say I do feel like this game masquerades as look at all these different ways you can score points. But in the end, it's really about the gems, I think.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was my final thoughts. Between a 4 and a 5 again for me. But since I have to decide,
you have to choose.
I'm going for 4.
Okay. All right.
Okay. I got to play this one 3 different times at 3 and 4 players. I won the first time I played. Overall, I found this game to present some good decisions, and I found that it required a lot of careful strategic thinking. But ultimately, I think the most important barometer in any game is whether it's fun. And for me, this one was honestly just meh.
Wow.
I give Ys a 3. It's definitely not broken. I don't even think it's bad. I think there are some rewarding moments to the game. It's challenging, it's strategic, but it's a 0 on theme. And honestly, even when I felt like I made good decisions, got what I wanted, even when I won the game, it just wasn't satisfying for me.
You mean that half a story at the beginning for the flavor text didn't inspire you?
There was some deficiencies, like most of a story.
I get that.
So that's where I land.
All right.
Well, that's our thoughts on Ys.
So where can we get Ys, Chris?
All right. So like all these games, don't want to sound like a broken record, they're out of print. Okay, so you have to get them on BGG. But this one, there are a ton of copies of this on BGG. 43.
Wonder why.
Yeah. Yeah, we always say that, right? So
no, try it out. Don't listen to me.
Yeah, I think so. like I said,
I've invested too many hours in this game not to recommend that people at least try it, because
you should try it.
You should totally disagree with me if you like it.
I could see how some people could come back to us and be like, this game sucks. And some people would say, this game is awesome. It's going to be polarizing. That's just all there is to it, I think, just by its very nature. I think it's just the nature of blind bidding in general. But yeah, 43 listings on BGG. If you want to try it out, you can definitely get it there. Pretty reasonable prices, too. Pretty cheap in some of the cases. So, yeah, that's our thoughts on Ys.
Sounds good.
Once upon a time, 590 BC, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, marries the magnificent Amyitis, daughter of the king of Media. But the beauty pines for the lush vegetation of her land. So Nebuchadnezzar calls for splendid hanging gardens to be built for her. The Babylonians are now getting ready to take up this tremendous challenge, on which will leave an indelible mark on the land for centuries to come.
Fantastic.
Nice.
Once upon a time.
I like that.
Yeah. It's like another trend in Ystari.
They all start with once upon a time.
Yeah. Amyitis. Published in 2007 by Ystari Games. Ranking on BGG at the time of this recording is 1,121. Designer, Cyril Demaed, as we mentioned before, the founder of Ystari Games. So this game's got a pretty funny story, actually. So when I first got into the hobby, one of my local game stores is Atomic Empire in Durham. And I remember this game literally sat on the shelf at Atomic Empire for like 6 years before I bought it. And I remember continuing to look at it, and the one thing I always thought about it was, good grief, that is the ugliest box cover ever. Like, I just remember thinking to myself, who would ever buy that game? And it ended up being me, right?
Yeah.
But it was like 6 years later, because it's ugly, okay? But what eventually got me to purchase it is there's a board game contributor. His name is Matthew Jude. Have you heard of him? You know who this is? So there's this podcast called This Game is Broken, where they do all these like weird mini games surrounding board games. It's a weird, eclectic kind of podcast. He's a really funny guy. And he was just raving about Amyitis one day, just like going nuts over it, how great he thought it was. Wow. And so I decided it had been sitting on the shelf long enough, and I was like, I'm just going to give this a shot. So I bought it. So rule summary for Amyitis. I cannot do a comprehensive rule summary for this game because it would be like 20 minutes, and I do not want to torture you all and make you all unsubscribe to this podcast. All right,
be rough.
So I'm going to leave a lot out. I'm just going to try to hit the highest points to hopefully give you an idea of how this works. Okay. So in Amyitis, what you're doing is you're constructing the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, and the way that you do this primarily is through action drafting. So on your turn, you're going to have a choice of 3 things that you can do. You can draft an action, you can move the caravan, or you can pass. And passing is a viable alternative in this game because when you pass, every time your turn comes around and there are still people going in the game and you've passed, you earn a coin. And money can be tight in this game, depending on what path you decide to go around. So let's start with drafting actions. And there will be a display set up in the game where you'll have a certain number of rows of cards, each consisting of 3 cards. When you select a card from a row, if it's the first card you take from a row, it's free. If a card has been taken from a row and you select a second card from that row, it'll cost you a coin. And if 2 cards have been selected from the row and you take the last card from the row, it will cost you the maximum 2 coins. Within these displays are 4 different kinds of cards. You've got architects who will be watering the gardens. They will score you 2 points when you select them. You can also select priests who will go and worship in the temples. And there will be 3 different temple tracks, and those will give you different benefits or points based on if you have the majorities in those temples. The third action is the farmer, where you can take a goods token from one of the 2 farms present on the board. And then the fourth action is the caravaneer, who will give you a camel token. The camel tokens are important for your third and final action. So the third action is taking those camels and then moving the caravan in a clockwise fashion around this separate secondary board that will allow you to take other actions to score points. Okay? So for every camel token you spend, you move the caravan a step, and you can land on spots, and you can purchase cards. So for example, you can purchase cards that increase your income, where you have more money. You can purchase cards that will increase how far your caravan can move. So when you spend a camel token, you can move 3 spaces instead of 1. And then other cards that will just give you straight victory points. But I think a thing that's worth mentioning is that these cards are tiered. So when you buy the first level 1 income card, for example, you start with the first card. It's a level 1 card. You can then jump to a level 2 card, which gives you better income, but you have to have the level 1 card first. And these cards are limited. So if you're trying to get the level 3 income card, you may not get it if somebody else gets it before you because there's only one of those. So there's a little bit of a racing element to those cards. In addition to the cards, you can also land on spaces that allow you to plant the Gardens of Babylon, where you will spend goods to plant the gardens. You'll get victory points and different bonuses for doing that as well. The game will end once all but 4 of the spaces of the garden have been planted. And again, that's generally how you play Amyitis. I left out a lot, but again, it's just too much to cover in this podcast. But that's the rules.
Well done.
Yeah. I was worried about this one, let me tell you. All right. So, Amyitis, question for you guys. How would you describe your first few turns of your first play of this game? What was it like for you?
Shooting in the dark. I had no clue what was happening.
Why do you say that?
Well, I found it to be hard because it's unclear what is important from the first couple rounds. It's unclear how important the caravan is. It's unclear how valuable the temple tracks are. It's unclear how much you are going to need money. Mm-hmm. It was clear enough that you are going to need the goods tokens from the farm. So that's kind of the first direction that I went. But yeah, there's not a lot of direction. There's not a lot of clarity about the objectives. Just kind of figure out how to pick up points.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, it was less about the clarity because I think you can kind of start to understand a little bit about like what's the primary way to score points here. But it is overwhelming, just the sheer amount of options that you have.
Yes.
And there's no mechanism in this game where it kind of sets you on a path.
Right.
There's no objective card or whatever that belongs to just you that says, go after this thing over here.
Right.
You know, it's just kind of open-ended. Here's all these 10 different ways to score points. Go do it.
Yep.
Which can be a little bit overwhelming, I think, for new players.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I would describe this game as an open game. In a lot of games, especially modern games, like Wingspan, Terraforming Mars, you have a starting faction, or you have a starting ability, or you have objectives, like in Strasbourg, where it gives you a trajectory. Oh, I'm supposed to do this, right? Or this is what I'm going for. Amyitis gives you nothing.
And it doesn't change later in the game.
It just drops you in the game, and it's like, score points. I remember the first time I played this with Matt and Ryan, we just looked at each other, and we were just like, what do we do? We just didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like, we knew what the rules were.
Right.
We knew what we could do, but we just didn't know how to score points, which is funny, because you can score points in a million ways in this game, but we just didn't know what was best. It was weird in that way, right?
Yep.
Do you find that to be a good thing or a bad thing? Did you like that?
It was extremely frustrating to me. I didn't feel any more confident about what I was going to do on my turn by 3/4 of the way through the game than I did on my first couple turns. You guys alluded to the fact that maybe it would change for me, like as that game progressed.
Yeah.
But honestly, I got to the end of the game and was like, I still don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I would do if I played it again.
Really?
I don't.
See, I feel like for me, in the second play, I had a much better handle on what I should be doing. I think this is one of those games, if you play it with people who have played it before, you're going to get killed.
Oh, and I did. I got crushed.
There's just no way, because you just don't know what's valuable. You don't know what the best options are. There are a lot of other ways your game can go south, too. We'll talk about it in a minute, but the lack of direction makes it very hard. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I think I enjoyed the openness at the beginning because it just makes you have to try to figure out your path forward, right? Mm-hmm. If it's too cut and dry of like, well, this is the direction you have to go because like I love Terraforming Mars, but I mean, it gives you a corporation at the beginning that says you are good at steel production or whatever.
If you don't do this, you will lose.
Right. In this game, you have more options and there's more to explore. You can go in any direction,
more
really.
paths to victory?
Perhaps. But I will say that what compounds that complexity is this is a planning game through and through.
Good grief, yeah.
Planning.
Oh, yes.
You have to be looking several turns in advance.
Oh, yeah.
Especially for the caravan, which I did not recognize in the first game that I played, of just how critical that is. Because the way that it's structured, everyone is moving the same caravan.
Mm-hmm.
So
shared.
It's a shared responsibility, kind of like a rondelle that's going around in circles, and each space on that rondelle requires a specific type of good that you have to have in order to go to that space. And so if I'm collecting a particular good because I think I can get the caravan to this particular space on this particular move in order to do this particular thing, and then somebody else moves it and bypasses that space, then I'm like,
it's the worst.
Well, now I'm screwed for the next 3 rounds until the caravan...
Yet, that person sees that you're trying to do that and moves it past the spot they know you want onto a spot they can use just to frustrate you.
Exactly. Which happens a lot.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's a great aspect to the game because it
too.
just forces that tension and those decisions. But I can see it being very frustrating for a new player and even for just players in general who wouldn't enjoy that particular aspect of the game.
Your plans just being foiled over and over again. Yeah.
I think that was the thing that frustrated me the most was I understood that I'm playing a game that is largely focused on and requiring a sufficient amount of planning. So I was working at that, and so many times throughout the game, my plans got foiled. And so I started going, I'm not planning like far enough in advance, you know? But the other thing that I ran into was for a long time in the game, I only had the level 0 caravan.
Yeah.
And so I could only move one step anytime I decided to spend the camel token and take that action. And what that meant was I was extremely limited in terms of my ability to execute on my plans, right? I didn't understand that until 2/3 of the way through the game, probably, and it was like, oh, I need to invest in that. But also, in order to get that, it's expensive.
It is.
You have to commit to it, and it's expensive.
And you have to give up something else. This is one of the things that really fascinates me about this game. While there are many ways you can score points in this game, there are two different limiting factors in this game: money and mobility.
Yep.
Okay. So you can either try to increase your income and have more money so that you can influence more workers and do more actions on your turn, which is great. But then you're hamstrung by not being able to move the caravan as much as you want, which can really crush you.
Yep.
Well, let's say you want to avoid that and you get really mobile with the caravan. Well, then you're sacrificing taking money, which is what happened to me last game. I was able to make it work. I was able to win that game, but I was super lean on money, which is hard to play. Now, do I think that that's bad? No, I don't. I think it makes the game interesting. It's, do I want to not have a lot of mobility and have a lot of money and try to make it work that way? Or do I want to have a lot of mobility and a lot of money and make it work that way? Play lean. It's a different challenge either way.
What did y'all think of the artwork in this game?
It's a Ystari game. I mean...
Not impressed?
Not impressed. I still think Metropolys has the worst artwork by a country mile, but...
Really? I actually thought it had the best of the three that we played.
See, that's art's so subjective.
Yeah, but the art matters a whole lot less in Metropolys. You don't need all the symbology in Metropolys that you have in these other games.
Yeah, but in Metropolys, I can't even tell where the freaking bridges are. You know what I mean? Like in Amyitis, it's functional.
Yeah.
It's just ugly.
It's not
as sin.
attractive.
It's terrible looking. In Metropolys, the art affected my gameplay.
Okay.
Like, I was not seeing things.
You were looking for the bridges because that was your card.
The freaking bridges, you can't see them, right?
Okay.
Like, I did not like that. But I think Ystari games, just in general, just are poorly produced.
I thought the caravan board was one of the ugliest boards I've ever seen in a board game. And you're moving this caravan token, which is so significant to the game, and it's this microscopically small pink camel that moves around the board. So,
yeah.
But it's a minor quibble ultimately.
Sure.
We're really about the gameplay here, unless the art is affecting your ability to play the game.
I have one more con. I think it's important. I want to mention it real quick. I'll be fast. The only thing I worry about with this game is replayability.
I almost brought that up.
Yeah.
I was going to save it to my final comments.
Okay, well, then I won't say too much, but I will say that because the way you set this game up, there's almost zero variability.
Variation. Okay.
The board setup, when you play this game, will almost be the same every time. So I do worry that with repeated play, it could get samey and stale.
Okay.
But then again, you set up a chessboard the same way every time, and it's beloved, right? So
it doesn't give you any direction.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that factored into my final thoughts on this game. I really enjoyed that puzzle of having to figure out, what do I even do in this game?
Yeah.
Right? I think that's the most interesting aspect to it. But I wonder if once you've figured that out, how much more there is to explore. Like you said, there are many games out there that have no variability in the setup, but the variability is in reacting to what other players are doing. And I think that's important to consider here. I think there is enough going on in this game that definitely plays a role. But there's sort of three different kind of primary upgrade paths you can go down, whether that's the mobility, the income, or just the point scoring cards. Right? I wonder if it's kind of like, well, I've tried all three of those. I've kind of settled in on the one that I think is the best. Aside from reacting to what other people are doing, how much replayability is there really in that? I don't know, but it could be a factor for some people, I think. I gave this game...
All this build-up.
I gave this game a 5. I did really enjoy it because of that puzzle, but... And this is why I said I was going to sound like a broken record. I was on the fence between 4 and a 5 again, because I definitely think it's a good game. But whether or not it's going to appeal to everyone, I think is the question.
Sure.
Both from the replayability aspect and just that sheer amount of planning and complexity that exists in this game. I can imagine many folks, if that's not your wheelhouse, of really loving that challenge of open-ended, who knows what I'm supposed to do in this game. It could not be for you. So I think with that caveat, I gave this one a 5.
All right, I should go next.
Okay.
Because I think I am that person that you're talking about. I didn't like it. I'm giving it a 2.
Oh!
A 2.
A 2.
A 2. Now, yeah, all that said, the thing is, I rarely come away from a game, even if I play poorly, going, I don't want to play that game again. That was painful. It was frustrating. I felt like I was just getting whacked the entire time. I felt like I was trying to get something going, and I got zero momentum, and it was just frustrating.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was just my play, my inexperience, but there's so much unpredictability in this game. We talk about randomness, but like there really wasn't that much randomness in the game apart from what cards come out. And the distribution of the cards and what turn order ends up being. You could end up kind of like having rounds in this game where you're like, well, I didn't really get anything that helps me move in the direction that I need to go. And I felt like that in multiple turns of this game. So, you know, I feel like if I end a game going, all right, if I played this again, what would I do differently? I feel like I should be able to answer that question, and I didn't have that experience with this game. And that's why I land where I landed.
So for me, this game has a lot of things that I like. All right, so multiple paths of victory, something that Ys did not have. I think there are just so many ways you can go about getting points in this game. And I think, too, the thing that I love the most about it is the planning. I mean, it is just multi-level planning. And I didn't mention this when we were talking about pros and cons, but when we were playing this game last time, I'm constantly finding myself going, how many camels do you have? How many camels do you have? How many good tokens do you have? What good tokens do you have? Right?
Yeah.
Because if you're not keeping up with that, you're not going to get to do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Because that caravan's moving around, and if you're not accounting for how it's going to move based on what your opponents are going to do, you're never going to get to do what you want to do in this game. That can be frustrating. I found it fascinating, and I loved it because it forces you to plan multiple steps ahead. I like that. For me personally, this game is a 5, and it's a strong 5. My only concern about it is with the replayability. It could go down just based on that. But I don't know. I could see myself still enjoying it like you would enjoy a game of chess. Chess is always the same, but you change the way you play in reaction to how your opponents are playing, and I think that's how you have to approach this game.
Yep, for sure.
All right. So that's our final thoughts on Amyitis. If you like what you heard, maybe interested in trying it out, I have good news. This one's really available as well on BGG. 45 BGG listings. Very similar to Ys, just a ton of them. A lot of Ystari games are very available in the marketplace.
It's sitting on the shelf in a lot of other game stores with dust.
Yeah.
And old.
I doubt you'll find it on a shelf like I did. But like this was several years ago.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look exciting on the box. But in my opinion, at least, I think it's worth a good try. So check it out. That's Amyitis.
Once upon a time.
That's right. Man, Ystari Games. I know I'm only speaking for myself here, but they impressed me. I really am impressed with this company and ready to play more of these games, to be totally honest.
Yeah, especially considering so many of these were designed by the same person.
Yeah. Or the same few
think,
people.
I think that's an impressive feat.
Yeah. I covered another game on Favorite Game Friday for the Dice Tower last week, Asteroids, which is a racing game that I think is designed by Cyril Demayed, which is also really freaking
Oh, cool. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, really cool.
We want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of Hidden Gems. If you would like to connect with us online, we'd love for you to do that. You can feel free to reach out to us on Instagram, where we're particularly active. You can check out our website and other episodes of the podcast at our website, hiddengems.games. Interact with us on our BGG Guild. There's now actually a link directly to that guild on our website, so check that out. We'd love for you to continue interacting with you online. I'm your host, Cameron.
This is Chris.
And I'm Jason.
Thanks for listening. This episode of Hidden Gems, number 4, was recorded in Raleigh, North Carolina on March 21, 2021. Join us in 2 weeks as we walk through a brief overview on train games and then highlight 3 unique train games, one of which was a precursor to the immensely popular Ticket to Ride. Hidden Gems is produced and edited by Chris Alley, Cameron Lockey, and Jason Yanchuleff. Our show's logo was illustrated by designer and artist Katelyn Nieto. Check out her work on Instagram at It's Katelyn Nieto. We would love to hear from you. Feel free to join the discussion on our many social media accounts. You can find us on Facebook at Hidden Gems Board Game Podcast, Instagram at hiddengems.podcast, and Twitter at Hidden Gems Board. Disagree with one of our reviews? Have something you want to say about one of the games we discussed today? You can also make your voice heard on our Board Game Geek Guild at BoardGameGeek.com. Once again, thank you for joining us on Hidden Gems, and until next time, fellow gem seekers, enjoy your games and enjoy your search.
Are you going to add your publication, ranking, designer?
Oh, I totally forgot about that.
Yep. Back it up!
Well, hang on. I don't have all that information, so...
Uh-oh. Did you not do your homework?
No.
I'm going to take your privileges away. Don't make me teach all these things. This is why you can't have nice things.
All right, what are the things?
Nice job. You remember how to end it?
I do now. Thanks for listening, and I'm your host, Cameron.
This is Chris.
We did it in the wrong order, guys.
Are we supposed to do it in the same order? I thought we just do it clockwise.
That's only at the beginning.
Well, shoot.
This is only episode 5. How do we end this thing? I think we would know this by now.